Hello everybody, welcome to the Week 11 review. The past week we looked at two articles. We looked at G.E. Moore's Proof of an External World, and we looked at the beginning of Kant's Prolegomena to any future metaphysics. So we started off with G.E. Moore, and he was responding to the claim by the skeptics that we can't know whether anything exists external to our bodies or not. You know, the idea that our senses deceive us, therefore we can't trust our senses, and therefore we don't know that we're not brains in vats or we're not in a dream or something along those lines. And Moore just thinks that this is crazy. And Moore starts out and he says, can I prove the external world exists? He's, sure I can. Here's a hand. Here's another hand. Therefore, there are at least two hands that exist externally of my body, or externally, therefore the external world exists. And Moore says, well, a lot of people won't find this satisfying. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay out for you the conditions, the three conditions for a rigorous proof, and show that I just proved that the external world exists. So the three conditions for a rigorous proof are that the conclusion has to be different than the premises. So in his case, premise 1 was here's a hand, premise 2 was here's a hand, and his conclusion was two hands exist. And just trivially speaking, here's a hand is different from saying that two hands exist, and likewise with the second premise. So it appears to meet his first condition for a rigorous proof, that the premise is different than the conclusion. His second condition for rigorous proof is that you must know that the premises are true. You can't just strongly believe it, you actually have to know it. And this is the sort of the soundness condition of an argument. In order for an argument to be sound, the premises have to be true, and it has to be a valid argument. And we'll come back to the second condition for rigorous proof a little bit later. And the third condition for a rigorous proof is that the conclusion must follow logically from the premises. So here's a hand, here's another hand, therefore there are two hands. The conclusion does seem to follow from the premises. Now the problem that people have raised with this is that it seems like when Moore says, well, you know, here's a hand, and he's claiming that this meets the second condition of his three conditions of a rigorous proof, that he knows that. There's people want to retort, well, you know, how do you know that? And Moore says, look, if you're looking for a proof of how I can say I know that here's a hand, you're asking the wrong question, and that's just an impossible answer to give. But, you know, I know that there's a hand here. I just know it. And this leads to Moore's claim that there are some things that you know that you don't need proof for, like that I'm not dreaming right now. He thinks that that's a ridiculous assertion. So that's why sometimes Moore's view is referred to as moral intuitionism. It's like instead of having a proof or evidence for belief or for knowledge, you just sort of have an intuition, and you just sort of, you know it. So yeah, I mean, right. I mean, you know, you don't need proof or evidence for this particular knowledge. And what Moore is really doing here is, essentially, I think that he's shifting the burden of proof from the skeptic, from sort of people to prove that they have knowledge of the external world, back to the skeptics. You know, the skeptics start out and say, okay, if there's an external world, you need to give me evidence that there's an external world. You need to prove it to me before you can say you know it. And Moore's just saying, no, look, that's ridiculous. We all know that there's an external world, and we all know that we're not dreaming. So you, as the skeptic, need to prove to us why it's the case that we're not, that we're dreaming right now, or we're brains in vats and things like that. And Moore thinks that his rationale of us knowing here's a hand is stronger than the proof that the skeptics can give of saying, providing these thought experiments, maybe we're dreaming, maybe we're that. Moore thinks that that's just not strong enough to warrant that type of external world skepticism. So that's his sort of rejoinder to the skeptics' claim that there's not an external world. And he knows that some people may not find it convincing, and others may. So then we moved on to Kant. on Thursday in Kant's Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics. And I started out class saying that we've sort of hit a central point in the course where, and the question that we've really been looking at so far, if you want to draw broad themes, is how can I know that what's going on in my mind, what my perceptions are right now, map onto anything in the external world? And there have been various answers to this question. Descartes said we can know it because there are certain truths, certain clear and distinct perceptions that I have that cannot be denied. I think, therefore I am. And he comes up finally with the conclusion that I have these perceptions, and one of these clear and distinct truths is that God exists, and God is not a deceiver, therefore God is not going to deceive me that my sense perceptions are wrong. So Descartes is a rationalist, and he also is known as a foundationalist, and that means that he starts with certain truths like God exists, and then he builds his system of epistemology from there. And we also have Hume and the empiricists. And Hume believes that the only way we can know anything external of us is through experience. So you have Descartes, who thinks that we can know certain things a priori, prior to experience. And you have the empiricists like Hume, Locke, Berkeley, those guys who think we can only know things after experience. So Hume just says, look, we're a bundle of sense perceptions. I have these vivid impressions. I form my ideas based on those impressions. Therefore, there must be something, he doesn't say what exactly. There has to be something external of us that's causing these sense perceptions. So that's how I know that there's an external world. And then Kant comes along and says, well, he